Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. And another heavyweight news and note smasher video today, starting with Ben Shalom and Joseph Parker. So Shalom became Parker's promoter a couple of weeks back when Parker signed with Sky and Boxer. And now Shalom is really going to work trying to get Parker's name out there, get people talking about him, especially in the United Kingdom where he will be fighting. So they're targeting, as you can see here by this headline, a September return. Headline: Deontay Wilder wanted as opponent for Joseph Parker. And remembering this is a Sky Sports story, they've got an interest in promoting Parker, and often with these things it's couched as news, but really it is a promotional vehicle for people connected with Sky who are going to be fighting or in events associated with Sky, and this is definitely part of that. But of potential fights, so Ben Shalom, who's really been getting Parker's name out there, as I mentioned, says of a Joyce fight that it was the first fight Joseph wanted to make. It's been well documented. We'd love that fight, and we'd hope that it still might happen. And I guess read between the lines there, hope that it still might happen. The fight's dead. It's not happening. You know, Joyce is not going to be farmed out from Queensbury and BT. It's just not happening. Of these other options, Shalom says, if it's not going to happen, that was the number one. We're looking at everything. We're looking at Otto Wallin. We're looking at Jermaine Franklin. We're even looking at Deontay Wilder. Now he's back in the mix. And perhaps the Dillian Whyte rematch. The great thing about Joseph is he wants the big fights, and he'll be fighting at the end of September. Well, I guess there is a question about if he wants the big fights. Certainly he wants the big money. I mean, he's recently turned down the IBF Eliminator with Filip Hrgović. Obviously, if the Joyce fight doesn't happen, then he's walked away from a potential mandatory shot in the WBO. 2 mandatories in 1 year. Can he make it a third? But of those potential options, I guess of the Wilder mention, Shalom's pulling out an Eddie Hearn special there, because Eddie Hearn has been notorious in recent years for his heavyweights to connect them to big names, and often big names that are with rival promoters who fight on different networks. And they're good fights if they were to be made, but mostly unattainable. But then you can call out if it doesn't happen, say, well, Joseph Parker wanted that fight, even if it wasn't really realistic. And let's say it now, Deontay Wilder, Joseph Parker, it's not happening. Not happening. That's just thrown out there to get a cheap headline, and Sky's sort of taken it hook, line and sinker. Deontay Wilder mentioned up in the headline there. Wilder, they couldn't afford him at this point. I mean, they tried to make that fight a few years ago. In terms of Wilder and Parker, about 5 years ago, 2017, there wasn't enough money in the fight to make it then. And if it was to happen this point, you know, Parker would want mega bucks, and Deontay Wilder, who's got paid, what, $50 million in the past couple of fights, he's probably going to want a purse that Sky and Boxer are not going to want to pony up. And if it was to happen in the United Kingdom, it's a bit of an odd place for an American and a New Zealander. They don't necessarily have those natural fan bases in that country. And that's where we'll circle back to some of those other names, because you had Otto Wallin, you had Jermaine Franklin, and the other one, Dillian Whyte. And if you've been following some recent videos, certainly I think the Dillian Whyte rematch is going to happen. If not next, it'll probably be the fight after. They are looking to build that fight. This is why, no doubt, Joseph Parker is signed there, because at the moment, this is the most realistic, makeable, big money fight, one for Whyte, but also for Joseph Parker. If you're walking away from mandatory shots in the likes of Hrgović, and one that would have been ordered as a mandatory eliminator if Joyce and Parker had been made, if you're walking away from 2 guaranteed title shots, you got to be doing it for something. And although people will say, well, there's nothing on the line for Dillian Whyte if Parker was to fight him, of course there is. A whole boatload of money. That's what Parker's career has been built off. But the other names, it is a question, because are they going to try and do Whyte and Parker straight away, or is there going to be some sort of interim fight? And if there is, those could be guys that could work. Remembering Dimitri Salita, who promotes Wallin and Franklin, is not connected with a specific network. He farms his fighters out all the time. Generally, like Wallin and Franklin, they can make a good B-side. I think Otto Wallin is a much more sort of appetizing fight, and he's maybe a little bit more proven than Franklin, but I wouldn't be surprised if both were made. But the thing is, though, is that paying Parker too much for the first fight and not really getting a return. Remembering, having Parker in the UK, it only really makes sense for him to have signed with Boxer and Sky if he's fighting UK opposition. Otherwise, it's a bit random. Wallin and Parker in the United Kingdom, Franklin and Parker in the United Kingdom. You can't do that on pay-per-view. No one's going to buy that in the UK. I don't think he's got either have the fan base, or there's no justification and probably financial sense that it makes to put it on pay-per-view in the United Kingdom. Sure, Wallin in Sweden, you can put that on pay-per-view. Parker back in New Zealand, and they will certainly put it on pay-per-view in New Zealand, no matter who Joseph Parker's fighting. But Sky, they can't pull the trigger on a pay-per-view for a non-UK opponent. And that's why I think the White fight is inevitable. But will they have one fight with Parker where it's not a tune-up, but maybe it's slightly below world level, but you can kind of go, this is a good fight night, and give it to the fans instead of putting it immediately on pay-per-view? Maybe they'll have some sort of snack-type fight, an appetizer to get people thinking, okay, Joseph Parker can go in there, do the business, and attract some attention. And if that was to be the case, well, maybe someone like Franklin is the more likely choice, and then fight White afterwards. Anyway, moving on. So there's a lot of ruminations there, but Shalom doing his job, talking about Parker, getting his name out there, keeping him in the headlines. Andy Ruiz Jr. is looking in pretty decent shape already, a few months out from his September 4 fight with Luis Ortiz. So already looking somewhere close to what some of his fight weights have already been, a couple of months out. So, yeah, this is some sort of plank he's doing on that half Swiss ball. What do you make of this condition? And, I mean, as I said in a tweet about this, a focused and dedicated Ruiz is going to be dangerous. If he's already in halfway decent condition now, and remember, it's all relative. Ruiz is never going to be the body beautiful. This is probably a decent angle. He's still going to look somewhat out of shape because he's always been out of shape. He's not going to be a guy that's going to drop down to 230 pounds or 240. More than likely, he's still about 255, 260, something like that here. But 255 has been a good fight weight for him in the past. But certainly people have been talking about this, and at least it's not going to be a fat camp by the looks of it for Ruiz Jr. for this Ortiz camp. Losing and twisting my tongue there. Tyson Fury is picking Oleksandr Usyk to beat Anthony Joshua in the rematch, which is August 20th in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, saying, I just think Usyk's too cute for him, too smart, too quick, and a southpaw. I think with Robert Garcia trying to train him to go on the front foot and be aggressive will only enable Usyk to land more often. I don't see it, but then again, what do I know? In heavyweight boxing, it only takes one punch. It wasn't a complete landslide last time. Usyk had a lot of marks on his face and he was cut up. He's not hard to hit, Usyk. He's right there in front of you. So obviously Joshua can land a big punch on him. Anyone can win a fight, as we've seen many, many times, and I'll wrap it up there. So a bit to sort of chew over there, and that is the risk with a more aggressive style that Usyk is a good counterpuncher, could make hay out of that. Joyce, who sparred more than 150 rounds with Anthony Joshua in the past, has sort of reflected on Joshua, saying AJ has gone a bit more odd recently. He's a bit of an odd guy. He used to be different. In sparring, sometimes he used to come toe-to-toe, tush-to-tush, and swing bombs. It used to be very exciting, and I used to really like sparring with him like this. And remembering that sparring is going back, sort of mid-decade of the 2010s. He continues, but all of a sudden he started working on his technique and using his footwork, being out of range and stuff. He switched up his style a little bit, and didn't go gung-ho. Changing your trainer can be hard, but it depends on how you are as a person. If Joshua can absorb all the new information and tactics, then it could be fine. But it can also take time to adapt and incorporate into your sparring and fighting. And that's a good point, because bringing in, a new trainer like Robert Garcia, you've binned off Rob McCracken, you've still got another one of your trainers from the failed last fight, and Angel Fernandez, and question marks about the setup, who's actually in charge here, because it's not clear. A couple of months with a new trainer, not always enough time to bed things in. But Joyce continues, I really hope he can win the rematch for British fans and British boxing. Joshua has a chance. He showed how he can turn it around with the Ruiz rematch, and when he came in with some different tactics. He was competitive in the first Usyk fight, and he has good power. So if he can take it to Usyk like he should have done in that first fight, he has a puncher's chance. Well, I'm sure Joshua was hoping for more than just a puncher's chance, but we'll see how that goes, August 20th. And rounding out this heavyweight news and note smasher video, Jeremiah Milton, the United States prospect, he'll be back as he's announced on the Jake Paul and Tommy Fury undercard. So that's going to be August the 6th. And he says Tulsa will have a spot in the building. Catch me August 6th, Madison Square Garden on the undercard of Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.